How's everybody? Fantastic. You all look fabulous. I like that, Mom. So everybody's having a good day, I hope. And let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for the day, and we thank you for the opportunity to gather around your table, that we can partake of your word, that we can share in the fellowship of your life, that our lives are enriched, our minds are open to who you are, what you are, that we can become the children you ask us to be. Lord, that we can share this light in a very dark world. And we thank you and give you all the praise and the glory in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. We're still talking the good news. I like good news because there's a lot of bad news going on. I'm here to tell you. People dying horribly. Watching the world now and watching what's happening is really, I know this sounds strange, but it's interesting. Because of what we know, we don't have to be afraid. I was saying this to Dad the other day, and I believe this very much. Abraham stood there with the Lord and said, "For one righteous, will you destroy the city?" He said, "No." And we know in the scripture it says he will not destroy the righteous with the wicked. Amen. Correct? That's right. I have that assurity and I believe those things. I do believe, though, that in our current condition, if we put ourselves in that place, we can face some serious hardships. And that's what I was saying to Dad the other day. Paul did that. Knowingly. Hey, Paul, don't go to Jerusalem. They're going to shoot you in the face with a bazooka. And he said, "See y'all, I'm heading that way." And they started to shoot him in the face with a bazooka. Well, it was close enough. They were beating him pretty good. I'm just putting it in our vernacular so people understand the situation. They were going to kill him. He did that. Why? Because that's what Paul had purposed as far as preaching the gospel. If we're going to purpose to do these things and speak out and whatnot, you can put yourself in harm's way. It's just a fact, especially with these people out here. It's that disturbing. So just understand that if you choose to put yourself in that place, if you choose to put yourself out there, you can face those things. Don't pull a gun and try and shoot somebody because you're telling them about Jesus and they want to beat you up. That ain't good. Now, if somebody breaks in your house and just wants to hurt you, well, that's a little different story. I will be defending myself and my family as well. There's realities to it. That's what Jesus said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. Protect yourself. Don't just be... We have these balances of things. And I like to say these things because I think this world is... I think it does disturb people at times. What do I do? How do I do? What? Just understand those things. Understand those small principles. When you put yourself in that place, you are subject to those things. And Paul, Jesus, he knew it. And when it was his time, he said, "I'm going to Jerusalem." And the disciples went, "What? What?" Yes. And he set his face toward it. That's just what Paul did. And Paul set his face toward it. If it wasn't, Paul was smart enough that I'm a Roman citizen, and soldiers like, "Oh my God, we can't let this guy die." We'll all get shot. You know, it's just the truth of it. Those are things that I think we need to be mindful of as we circle ourselves in this world, how we move around and what we say, and understanding that. So that's just a little something extra. Because we're going to talk about syncretism and the good news. Okay? Anybody know what syncretism is? Heard the word before? Yes, you should have. Huh? That's a nice boy band.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you one of the songs.
Me neither. Syncretism is something we're going to learn about this evening, and the movement of this throughout history. But we're going to start with Isaiah 29:13, because I want to read this. It's something we used in Inside the Faith Loop the last couple days, because it's very valid to the point that I'm going to make. This is the ESV. And the Lord said, because this people draw near with their mouth and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. And in the KJV, wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draw near me with their mouth and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. These are thoughts and words of understanding that we've discussed on many different levels and at many different times. Honor. It's the weight. That's what the word means here. It just means weight, something heavy. Concretely in the pictograph, it's liver, because the liver is the heaviest organ in your body. Okay? But what are we looking at? What honor? Again, it's what we've talked about. The weight on the one side of the scale is Jehovah. Let me be weighed in an even balance, that the Lord may know my integrity. To have integrity, you need to first be complete, whole, without flaw. Perfection. We know, Jehovah knows this physical part of us is corrupted. He knows that. So what is our completion at this point? Because we've not all yet attained everything. So our completion is within the construct of the renewing of the mind, so that our conduct is representative of what we were created to be, even in this corrupted flesh, which is what Jesus accomplished. This is what Jesus did. Okay? And we are accountable to that same conduct, that same existence. You can't be Jesus, Brian. Well, I'm not trying to be Jesus. I'm trying to be like Him. I'm working. I'm not trying. I'm emulating Him. Because He is the way that shows us what truth is that brings life. And if we do that, that's the point. Because He is my brother. And He is Lord. And He was set in that place because He was able to overcome this world. So He's showing me how. Thank goodness. So that honor must be there. So they honor me with their lips and their minds, because the word hearts, lab, in Hebrew means that, what you think with, the center of the being. Well, your center's here. They always equated it in the ancient world to the heart, the center of a being, because you feel things there. We do. When your mind works, when your brain is working, when things are there, you feel emotions. We feel those things through our bodies. We do. It's just something that is there. We feel the joy. We feel the sadness. Right? We do. Sometimes we cry, even when we're happy. And sometimes we cry when we're sad. That's the nature of it. and the emotional part of it, as long as you don't lose your reason. Reason is the key. And we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes, because this is part of the syncretism that really messes people up. So their minds are not thinking, their lips are saying it, blah, 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 blah. We have a lot of people that flap the gums about Jesus, but where's the mind? And their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Everybody remembers what the word fear means, right? Awe, right? Reverence. In the ancient construct of that, it's when you reverence somebody, when you awe, you're listening. You're hearing them properly. That's who you pay attention to. Who you give reverence to is who you listen to. So we should reverence Jehovah. But he's saying their reverence for me is the precepts of men. How different is that in our culture? The doctrines of men is how we believe in Jehovah. Doctrines and traditions. And we are inundated with the traditions of men. And if you remember Matthew, when he said, you will forego the commandments of God for the traditions of men. Same thing. This is what was said to Israel here. Jesus reiterated here. We could say the same thing today. Christianity defines the worship or service of Jehovah by their doctrines and commands, not by Jehovah's. See, we have been spreading Christianity, not the gospel. There's a big difference. It's a big chasm. And this is what Jehovah said here to the Israelites through the prophet. What would he say to us today? We're teaching the commandments of men. This is how you listen to God. You listen to us. And we'll tell you how it's done. I'm not here to tell anybody how it's done. I'm here to share with people what I've come to understand in my own life and what Jehovah is sharing and what Jesus came to share about the Father in heaven. You can go and then test my mind, test the spirits, test my mind to see. Go read. Go read it for yourself. Dad made mention a while back about, the banning of the Bible and what the consequences of those things. And I was doing some research through the day, and I come across this information. It was just a bunch of different pieces, and I got to do a little more research. But it was funny because that's what one of the punishments. I think it was like in 808 something, 890 or something like that. You'd be stoned to death for having a Bible. That was one of them. The other was in the 1200s. The one pope said you would be whipped, loss of property, and so you're whipped and loss of property and burned at the stake. Well, why don't we just get to the burning of the stake? I mean, what? Yeah. Now, I'm going to research this a little bit more because I want to make sure all the references and things like that, because I just found this in one of these things that a man... But, I mean, he's citing references. So, why do you have to whip them and take their property first and then burn them at the stake?
Well, because they don't want your family to have any property either.
My goodness, man. Seemed a little overkill.
A little bit. No, it's to make a point. They're going to torture you first. That's terror.
That's terror. So the question is the goal of Jehovah to terrorize mankind? We sure think it is. Because the Christian traditions teach people to fear God, to be in terror of Jehovah. Solomon once wrote, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And those things don't correlate. Because terror does not beget wisdom. It has torment.
And it interrupts your reason.
That's right. Terror has torment. Fear, reverence, awe. Now it's got to be the right one. Because it's just the opposite when you read that. And I've thought about this on numerous occasions when Solomon, but fear of man is the beginning of terror. And we're seeing it, aren't we? That's a true statement. Because the fear of Jehovah, listening, being reverent to what He has to say to us through Jesus Christ, is the beginning of wisdom and how we come into the knowledge of the truth. But there is the opposite, and that's what most of this is. The fear of man is the beginning of terror, and they just terrorize people to death. How much more do we need to see in the world? How much more? And it's just the truth of it. This one doctrinal concept of terror that has been taught by the men of the church helped shape the centuries after Nicaea. So, and two, here's the other part of this, guys. I didn't read all this, but there's another part as you go down. I think it's in the third verse. This is the 13th. I think it's in the 14th or 15th verse. Job is talking about counsel. And this counsel that he's talking about is the same word used as in the garden. Everything is here. The whole thing runs through it, understanding what we're talking about. But how were the traditions we see within Christianity today created? And this is why I want to look at syncretism. If you haven't heard this before, syncretism, this is the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Number one is the combination of different forms of belief or practice. Two, the fusion of two or more originally different inflectional forms. In Britannica, the fusion of diverse beliefs and practices, and they'll use the term, they even go so far as religious, because this is where it really, but it's done this throughout history. This isn't just a modern Christian thought process. Instances of syncretism, as for example Gnosticism, a religious dualistic system that incorporated elements from the Oriental mystery, Judaism, Christianity, and Greek philosophical concepts, were particularly prevalent during the Hellenistic period. That's 300 BCE to 300 CE. That's 600 years. That's a long time. Now notice 300 CE. When did Nicaea happen? 325. The fusion of cultures that was effected by the conquest of Alexander the Great, 4th century BCE, his successors and the Roman Empire tended to bring together a variety of philosophical views that resulted in a strong tendency toward religious syncretism. Orthodox Christianity, although influenced by other religions, generally looked negatively upon these syncretistic movements. Now, I want to take you to Revelation real quick, and let's get this picture. And honestly, this just hit me this afternoon, and I was talking with Dad about it. I said, when I was reading this. Daniel's fourth beast, what was it made up of?
Iron and clay?
That was at the bottom. What was at the top? Gold. What was in the middle? Bronze. Then iron, and then iron mixed with clay for the feet. What is it representing? It's meshing all the different ideologies of the world up to that point into one common beast. One common thought, one common ideology, one nation. Syncretism. We have to bring, where else do we see that? Babel. They brought the whole world together. Where else do we see it? Oh yeah, that guy named Nebuchadnezzar. He tried that. Alexander tried it. Alexander's goal was that, to bring Greek culture to the entire world, because he thought it was the truth. He thought it was the reality of life. His teacher was Aristotle. His father hired Aristotle to tutor Alexander. That was his teacher. And he believed it. As you can tell by the way he went about whooping up and down all over the world. But then Rome, he died. His kingdom was split up into 4 pieces, ultimately succumbing to the Roman Empire. This is what we see. The Seleucid was part of that, which came down. That's what the Maccabees were about. Antiochus the Fourth. Epiphanies. Does anybody know what Epiphanies means? No. Yeah, our language. Madman. That's what it meant. That's what it means. Epiphanies. Madman. Antiochus the Fourth, the madman. That's what he was called. By the Jews especially. But that's true in history. You read any history, they'll say Epiphanies, because he was called the madman. That's what the Maccabees fought against. When Jesus references, when you see the abomination that makes desolate standing in the holy place, that's what he was referencing. Because Antiochus came down and took Jerusalem. He sacrificed to his gods in the temple pigs and all kinds of animals. That's true in history. This is what the Maccabees fought back against and reestablished, or else where was the temple? See, we have to understand history as it goes through. Knowing references and understanding why Jesus could say something like that. He wasn't forecasting something in the future in the sense of what people understood or didn't understand. No, they understood his reference. They understood it completely. Because when the Romans came and did that, that's what they did too. They did the same thing as Antiochus did. Simple. It's not difficult. But this is where syncretism got its start, and we see this within the knowledge of good and evil. But that is syncretism. And we don't consider, I believe this very much, we don't consider the implications of this thinking through the ages. And that's why we miss the mark. This is why we misrepresent and misunderstand John's revelation. The consequences of our current age, the consequences, what we're seeing out here of our current age, are a direct result of the continuing efforts to define the knowledge of good and evil by our own strength. The doctrines of mankind that have formed the cultural traditions within all the nations, tribes, and peoples continue to perpetrate the knowledge of good and evil, and the rebellion continues as the revolution of mankind against his Creator. And we're going to start back, and I want to show you this, where these things come from. We've talked about Heraclitus, correct? Heraclitus, this was 500 BCE, even before the Hellenistic period, but this is where a lot of this came from. Heraclitus, born 540 BCE, Ephesus. He was an Ephesian. Anatolia, now Seljuk, Turkey. He died in 480. Though he was primarily concerned with explanations of the world around him, Heraclitus also stressed the need for people to live together in social harmony. He complained that most people failed to comprehend the logos. Now, we use this term logos here, and it would have been said that way in Greek. But what do you think this word truly means to a Greek in that culture? You guys know or have an idea? And it's really the main, if you put this in a Greek translator today, if you put logos in a Greek translator today, you will get this English word. Reason. We've talked about these things. But when you come back, and this is an explanation of why these things are happening, what we're seeing in the world, and why we've missed so badly with the gospel. We're spreading Christianity. We're not spreading the gospel, folks. There's a big difference. Because Christianity, I'm explaining what Christianity is right here. No, it's Christianity. This is Christianity. Christianity is a form of a system of beliefs that have nothing to do with Jesus Christ. That's a fact. Why is it like it is? And I'm going to show you here in history. But he said most people failed to comprehend reason. Now there's two things to deal with here, and the word breaks out like this. Well, do you have a reason for existence? And then how do you reason that existence? See? The word works in both concepts. Do we have reason to be in the earth? We do, but do we understand it? And how do we reason? Is this true reason, what's going on in the world today? Do you have a reason for what we're doing? And is it the reason we exist? So this is a very fluid context of existence that Heraclitus is putting out for people to consume. But this is where it goes kooky. The universal principle through which all things are interrelated and all natural events occur, and thus lived like dreamers with a false view of the world. A significant manifestation of the Logos, Heraclitus claimed, is the underlying connection between opposites. And this is what he believed, a yin and yang. You had to have good and evil. Balance. That's how they do it. That's a very Eastern context of philosophy today, right? Opposites, flux, movement. It's a constant form of change. And good and evil are constantly banging against each other to hold the balance of everything in place. And this is what Heraclitus is talking about. And he believed that this logos, he believed that the material element of the entire world is fire. Everything comes from fire. Spirit, right? That's what we talk about. Where do these contexts come from? He's talking about logos, uses this terminology, understanding of reason, and this is the universal principle. And he also called it the spermatikos, the generator of the universe. Not the God, but the generator. This is his ideas concerning the world. You know what's funny is? This is Encyclopedia Britannica too, I'm just reading out of. Heraclitus was unpopular in his time and was frequently scorned by later biographers. His primary contribution lies in his apprehension of the formal unity of the world experience. Now, if you go to the other reference in Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they go into much more depth about what he thought and what he believed, and you can do that. Just, I got a reference here if anybody would like it. We'll put it available to people if you want to look. So, with that being said, I want to share from Justin the Martyr his first apology. We're going to read from his first apology, chapter 5 first. This is called Christians Charged with Atheism. We have no idea about these things because we're not told. We're not talked to this way. The early first century congregations were called atheists. Why? Atheist. They were called atheists because they didn't believe in the Roman gods. So they weren't. The early believers that followed the way were called superstitious. It was called a superstition. It was just a fleeting. Most Romans like poo-pooed him, like, you're not. Yeah, Justin's first apology was to the emperor Titus Aelius Adrianus Antoninus Pius Augustus Caesar. He is making this writing directly appealing to Caesar. Why is he writing this to Caesar? Because an apology is a defense. He's defending a position. This is the point. Because he says, and to Lucius the philosopher, the natural son of Caesar, and the adopted son of Pius, a lover of learning, and to the sacred Senate, with the whole people of the Romans, I, Justin, the son of Priscus, and grandson of Bacchius, natives of Flavia Neapolis, Naples, in Palestine, I'm kidding, present this address and petition in behalf of those of all nations who are unjustly hated and wantonly abused, myself being one of them. This is why he writes this. Justice demanded. So we're going to go down to the 5th chapter here. Christians charged with atheism. So now you have an understanding of what this is being, why he's saying these things. Why then should this be? In our case, who pledged ourselves to do no wickedness nor to hold these atheistic opinions. You do not examine the charges made against us, but yielding to unreasoning passion and to the instigation of evil demons, you punish us without consideration of judgment. For the truth shall be spoken, since of old these evil demons, affecting apparitions of themselves, both defiled women and corrupted boys, and showed such fearful sights to men that those who did not use their reason in judging of the actions that were done were struck with terror. And being carried away by fear, and not knowing that these were demons, they called them gods. Right? And gave to each the name which each of these demons chose for himself. And when Socrates, this is his argument, and when Socrates endeavored by true reason, by true logos, and examination to bring these things to light and deliver men from the demons, then the demons themselves, by means of men who rejoiced in iniquity, compassed his death. As an atheist and a profane person, on the charge that he was introducing new divinities. This is his argument. He's using Socrates. And in our case, they display a similar activity. For not only among the Greeks did reason prevail to condemn these things through Socrates, but also among the barbarians were they condemned by reason, or the word, the logos, himself. He's got it capitalized. Himself, talking about a being, logos, who took shape and became man, and was called Jesus Christ. This is one of the first instances of this being taught, I've read, long before Athanasius. So you understand where Athanasius is coming from. Right here. He had read Justin's apology. And in obedience to him, we not only deny that they who do such things are these gods, but assert that they are wicked and impious demons whose actions will not bear comparison with those even of men desirous of virtue. Socrates, he believed Socrates was righteous here and a follower of Jesus. Heraclitus. Yeah. That's in another part, and I'm not. No, that's fine. I'm just going to read a few of these because I want to give you an idea of the writing that is here and why these things, this was earliest parts of syncretism. We're going to go to chapter 20. These are heathen analogies to Christian doctrine. And the Sibyl and Hystapis, said that there should be a dissolution by God of things corruptible. And the philosophers, called Stoics, teach that even God himself shall be resolved into fire. What did I say was the material? What did Heraclitus say was the material principle? He says, and the philosophers called Stoics teach even that God himself shall be resolved into fire. And they say that the world is to be formed anew by this revolution. By this what? But we understand that God, the creator of all things, is superior to the things that are to be changed. If, therefore, on some points we teach the same things as the poets, if, therefore, on some points we teach the same things as the poets and philosophers whom you honor, and on other points are fuller and more divine in our teaching, and if we alone afford proof of what we assert, why are we unjustly hated more than all others? What's he saying here? Here, this is right at the beginning of the 2nd century. 110, something like that. We see Paul writing to the Corinthians, why are you saying this one's of Paul and this one Apollos and Cephas? What about Jesus? These are the things that began to make their appearance, and it wasn't a matter, it was developing what we call Christianity. It was developing the traditions of men within this construct to bring about what we see in the world today. To bring about Nicaea. This has nothing to do with Jehovah. He keeps talking about, and if you read about Justin's life, Justin wanted to be a philosopher. That was his main goal in life. He had went to like 8 or 9 different schools of philosophy, searching for one that he could take and hang his hat on, and he found one finally. And he's equating all of these things to Heraclitus and the old, and I'm going to show you here. For while we say that all things have been produced and arranged into a world by God, we shall seem to utter the doctrine of Plato. And while we say that there will be a burning up of all, we shall seem to utter the doctrine of the Stoics. And while we affirm that the souls of the wicked, being endowed with sensation even after death, are punished, and that those of the good being delivered, those of the good, that is a direct reference to what philosopher? It's Plato. That's a direct reference to Plato, because that's who he's referring to here, is Plato. And the Stoics came and were a product of Platonic philosophy. So, and that those of the good being delivered from punishment spend a blessed existence. We shall seem to say that the same things as the poets and philosophers. And while we maintain that men ought not to worship the works of their hands, we say the very things which have been said by the comic poet Menander and the other similar writers. For they have declared that the workman is greater than the work. Did you guys catch that? Just because they said that the workman is greater than the work, they're believers in Jehovah? Interesting, huh? We're going to go to chapter XLV. I know it's XLV. I ain't trying to count off. Is it 45, Mom?
Yeah.
You done did good.
That was 50.
Yep. 10 minus, yeah. And then 5. It's actually, I wrote that down. It's 46, actually. The word, now listen, the word in the world, this is this section, this chapter, the word in the world before Christ. But lest some should, without reason, and for the perversion of what we teach, maintain that we say that Christ was born 150 years ago under Cyrenius and subsequently in the time of Pontius Pilate, taught that we say he taught and should cry out against us all, though all men who were born before him were irresponsible. Let us anticipate and solve the difficulty. So what's the point of this? What's he trying to get at? The word Jesus was born only 150 years ago. And if he's the Logos, that's impossible. It pre-existed. This is the first instance you see of this. And this is what the Word in the world before Christ. This stuff's been around a long time. We have been taught that Christ is the firstborn of God. And we have declared above that he is the Word of whom every race of men were partakers. And those who lived reasonably, this is Logos thought process, are Christians. Even though they have been thought atheists. As among the Greeks, now listen, those who lived reasonably are Christians, even though they have been thought atheists, as among the Greeks, Socrates and Heraclitus and men like them. And among the barbarians, Abraham and Ananias, Azarias and Misael and Elias, and many others whose actions and names we now decline to recount because we know it would be tedious. So that even they who lived before Christ and lived without reason, without Logos, without the Word, were wicked and hostile to Christ, and slew those who lived reasonably, but who, through the power of the Word, according to the will of God the Father and Lord of all, he was born of a virgin as a man, and was named Jesus, and was crucified and died and rose again and ascended into heaven. An intelligent man will be able to comprehend from what has been already so largely said. And we, since the proof of this subject is less needful now, will pass for the present to the proof of those things which are urgent. This is one of the main ante-Nicene fathers. And we wonder why we believe in Trinitarian doctrine. Doctrines of men. This is just a highlight. You ought to read this whole mess. Because this is the first his apology. His first apology is 51 chapters. Now they're all small like this, but it's a lot. Last one here that I will read. So XL or LX. So that's 60, right? How's that? Feeling good now? Oops. Actually, there's more than 51. Because that's 60. Oh, mercy. Did I write that down wrong?
Did you need to write 40?
Oh, okay. I'm going to read these two together here because this is 59 and 60. The first one is Plato's obligation to Moses, and the next one is Plato's doctrine of the cross. And that you may learn that it was from our teachers. We mean that the account given through the prophets, that Plato borrowed his statement that God, having altered matter which was shapeless, made the world. Here the very words spoken through Moses, who, as above shown, was the first prophet, and of greater antiquity than the Greek writers, and through whom the spirit of prophecy, signifying how and from what materials God had first formed the world, spake thus. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was invisible and unfurnished. I didn't know it was invisible, but that's what he said. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the waters. And God said, let there be light. And so it was. So that both Plato and they who agree with him, and we ourselves have learned, and you also can be convinced, that by the word of God the whole world was made out of the substance spoken of before Moses. I didn't know Plato was talking about Moses. What's this guy talking about? And that which the poets called Erebus, we know was spoken of formerly by Moses. And he references Deuteronomy 32:22. Now Plato's doctrine of the cross is, and the physiological discussion concerning the Son of God, the physiological discussion, him as a person, as a being, concerning the Son of God in the time of Timaeus of Plato, where he says he placed him crosswise in the universe. This is Plato. He placed him crosswise in the universe, the Logos. He borrowed in like manner from Moses. For in the writings of Moses it is related how that that time, when the Israelites went out of Egypt and were in the wilderness, they fell in with poisonous beasts, both vipers and asps, and every kind of serpent, which slew the people. And that Moses, by the inspiration and influence of God, took brass and made it into the figure of a cross. And set it in the holy tabernacle, which he didn't do that, and said to the people, if you look to this figure and believe, you shall be saved thereby. And when this was done, it is recorded that the serpents died, and it is handed down that the people thus escaped death. Which things Plato reading, and not accurately understanding and not apprehending that it was the figure of the cross, but taking it to be a placing crosswise, he said that the power next to the first God was placed crosswise in the universe. And as to his speaking of a third, and as to his speaking of thinking of a third, so what's he referencing there? Spirit, right? And to his speaking of a third, he did this because he read, as we said above, that which was spoken by Moses, that the Spirit of God moved over the waters. For he gives the second place to the Logos, which is with God, who he said was placed crosswise in the universe, and the third place to the Spirit, who was said to be borne upon the water, saying, and the third around the third. That's deep. And hear how the spirit of prophecy signified through Moses that there should be a conflagration or a conflagration. He spoke thus, everlasting fire shall descend and shall devour the pit beneath. It is not, then, that we hold the same opinions as others, but that all speak in imitation of ours. Did you guys catch that? Among us, these things can be heard and learned. I'm going to go, everlasting fire, blah, blah. It is not then that we hold the same opinions as others, but that all speak in imitation of ours. Among us, these things can be heard and learned from persons who do not even know the forms of the letters, who are uneducated and barbarous in speech. Though wise and believing in mind, some, indeed, even maimed and deprived of eyesight, so that you may understand that these things are not the effect of human wisdom, but are uttered by the power of God. That's Justin, guys. I don't say the things that I say lightly, especially because I've never said what I've thought about Christianity in the way that I'm saying it. And I said that this morning for the first time because I truly believe this at this point. We are not spreading the good news. Mankind, since this time, you can read that right there. What's he spreading? Well, it's the first development of Christianity and the forms and traditions that they brought into play. That syncretism of the world, the beast there. Rome, Dad's been talking about the first beast in Revelation 13. The second becoming what was formed out of this, which had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. I'm just saying. Now we can understand and begin to understand what John was purposing through, or Jesus was purposing through John in this revelation. And what he revealed to him. First, to go and warn the congregations, because this is what was happening in the first century. Why did he say to the Ephesians, you forgot your first love? Could it be, who was from Ephesus? No, we just read it. Heraclitus. Heraclitus was an Ephesian. He was born in Ephesus. Do you think his writings might have hung around there? Sure. Might have had some influence, might have done that? Yes. Our writings hang around a lot, don't they? We still have writings from the ancient world. Some 2,000 years ago, right? We have the Bible. So it's not hard for me to think that those weren't there and available then. And people still teaching these things. Justin knew it. He knew Heraclitus. And he took and saw Jesus as a reference to what Heraclitus's flux and reason and logos and Plato's crosswise. Good. The second place. And the progenitor of the universe. See, I won't say all because I couldn't say that, but I think it's pretty much most of the creation myths that we see in the world today, it is the lesser God that is the creator, not the main one. It's the lesser. And this is the role that Jesus took upon himself, that they put on him, I should say. He didn't take it. He's not the creator. Jesus is not the creator. He's the second Adam, the second man, created in the image and likeness of Jehovah to bring about the restoration and the salvation of mankind. This is the good news which we have brought. That Jesus is the Son, born into this world to bring us the way of truth that brings life. And He has shown us plainly of the Father, that if you believe in Him, you shall also obtain this eternal life. That's the good news. That's the way. It is not Christianity. I'm sorry, if people are offended by that, so be it. But listen, look at what we just read. This is what was happening that soon after Jesus, after the apostles, for crying out loud. That wasn't that long after Peter, Paul, John, James, all those guys. Wasn't that long, guys? Because I think Paul was executed, what, in the 60s? I think so. Because it was under Nero. My goodness. And Paul was dealing with it with the Corinthians. So when we see these things, we need to start looking, because I'm going to continue this. This is what we have to understand about the gospel, and we're going to look at the larger role of Constantine, Augustinian Platonic Christianity, Aquinas, Aristotelian Christianity, American Christianity. These are all syncretist constructs of what we just read here and what was happening to bring about Nicaea and to bring about this. Because the enemy doesn't like it. There is a revolution raging, and they're all walking towards the holy city. And I'm not talking about Jerusalem, folks. I want people to be very clear. Yeah, we understand Jerusalem. We understand that those things. I'm talking about the holy city. I'm talking about the one that Jehovah built for the first man. I'm talking about that hedge of protection where He set up His counsel in that day. And when the adversary came and set his counsel in the midst of that garden, in the midst of that city, and said, did God really say? The revolution began. And they're heading right back there. That's where they're headed. This isn't about what people think it is. It's about war with Jehovah. And this is why we're seeing, and this is the movement of it. Questions? Anybody's thoughts? All right. Think on it. Go and read these things. If you want the references, I've got them. Okay? Lauren, there. You know what, darling? Do me a favor, because the references are in the notes. You see them right there. Put those. Now, I don't have the e-sword. That I don't have, because I'm gonna have to do that at a different time. But if anybody wants the references to the Britannica, to Stanford Encyclopedia, that kind of thing, if you want to read this, and I will put together a PDF with Justin's writings here, if anybody wants to read them. I'm not making this stuff up.
He's a big hero of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, he is, baby. Justin's the dude.
Oh, yeah.
That's where everything's based on, man. It started right there. And And he was out there.
He really twisted things to fit.
Yeah.
What he wanted to fit.
He was a philosopher.
Yeah, he was, yeah, that's definitely false.
And he saw this opportunity with all the things he knew and he believed this is a way to make himself prominent. That's all it was. This guy wasn't born again. Not at all.
Well, that's going on today too.
Yeah. So, and I know people go, oh, Brian, you can't say it. Yes, I can. I can read it right there. Pretty cut and dry. So, okay, good. Fantastic. I will do that. Did you guys get those in there? In the description? Just put those links in the description.
Do you want all four of those?
All four?
Do you want the Merriam-Webster one?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Because you always have the two that's.
Yeah. That's fine, baby girl. Yep. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for watching. Those on the Faith Loop. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope it makes you think. That's the goal, making you think. Everybody have a great evening. Enjoy. Drive home safely. All that sort of jazz. Till next time, remember, give love, give life, give Jesus. Not Socrates. Socrates,
What about the other dude?
Plato,
No, other guy.
Aristotelian,
No, who's the other, no.
Heraclitus.